The studio lights of The View were unusually bright that afternoon, casting a polished glow over the set as producers hurried behind the cameras. It was meant to be a light, entertaining episode featuring a special international guest, Rowan Atkinson, the legendary comedian known for his quiet humor and expressive acting style. The audience was buzzing with excitement, unaware that the energy in the room would soon shift from laughter to tension. Backstage, Rowan sat quietly reviewing his notes. He wasn't a man of many words off-screen, preferring observation over confrontation. A producer reassured him everything would go smoothly. "Just a fun conversation, a few laughs, maybe some talk about your career," she said. Rowan smiled politely but remained reserved, nodding once. Across the studio, the co-hosts were already in motion. Among them, Joy Behar was in her usual sharp form, energetic, outspoken, and ready to steer the conversation wherever she felt it needed to go. The atmosphere was typical for the show, lively, unpredictable, and often opinion-driven. When the segment began, applause filled the studio. Rowan entered, greeted warmly by the audience. He gave a modest wave, slightly awkward but charming in his familiar, understated way. Joy immediately leaned forward. "We are honored to have Mr. Bean himself here," she said with a teasing grin. Rowan corrected gently. "Well, Rowan Atkinson, actually." The audience laughed. The conversation started smoothly. His career, physical comedy, the global impact of his silent humor. Rowan spoke carefully, choosing his words with precision. Joy, however, kept pressing for more personal takes, steering the discussion toward broader cultural and political themes. At first it was subtle, a question about comedy boundaries, then another about public responsibility for entertainers. Rowan responded calmly, stating that his focus had always been on humor as a universal language, not a political tool. He emphasized neutrality, preferring to keep his work separate from controversy. Joy tilted her head. "But don't you think in today's world, staying neutral is kind of a statement itself?" A small shift rippled through the audience. Rowan paused, sensing the direction of the conversation changing. "I think comedy works best when it unites people rather than divides them," he replied carefully. But Joy leaned in further. "Still, you have influence. People listen to you. Don't you feel some responsibility to take a stand?" The studio grew quieter. Rowan's expression remained composed, but his hands folded more tightly. "My responsibility," he said slowly, "is to make people laugh. That's where I contribute best." There was a brief silence, the kind that feels heavier under studio lights. A few audience members clapped politely, unsure whether the moment was serious or simply thoughtful. Joy wasn't done. She smiled, but her tone sharpened slightly. "Some would say that's avoiding the issues of the world." Rowan's gaze shifted toward her, still calm, but firmer now. "And some would say," he replied, "that forcing every comedian into commentary turns laughter into obligation rather than joy." A murmur ran through the audience. Behind the scenes, producers began exchanging nervous glances. This wasn't in the script. The energy was shifting too quickly. Joy crossed her arms. "I just think it's easy to say I just make people laugh when the world is burning around us." That was the moment the tone changed completely. Rowan leaned back slightly, taking a breath. His voice remained controlled, but there was an edge now. "If every conversation must end in conflict," he said, "then perhaps we lose the ability to simply enjoy each other's company." The audience reacted. Some clapped, others stayed silent. The tension was unmistakable. Joy responded immediately. "That sounds like privilege talking." A sharp silence hit the set. Rowan looked at her for a long moment. The humor that usually defined him was gone. Instead, there was quiet disappointment. "I came here to share joy with your audience," he said softly, "not to defend my right to exist as a comedian without a political label attached to it." The studio went still. For a second, it seemed like the show might recover. A producer signaled to shift topics, but Joy spoke again, her voice firm, refusing to let the moment pass. "People don't live in comedy sketches, Rowan. They live in reality." That was the final spark. Rowan slowly stood up. The audience gasped slightly, unsure whether it was part of a segment or something real. He adjusted his jacket, looking toward the hosts, then the audience. "I think," he said calmly, "this conversation has moved far away from what I was invited here to do." He gave a small nod, Polite, restrained, but there was finality in it. Without raising his voice, without dramatic gestures, he stepped away from his seat. The studio erupted into confused noise. A producer called his name softly off camera. Joy looked momentarily taken aback, as if not expecting him to actually leave. But Rowan continued walking, his expression steady. No anger, no shouting, just quiet resolution. As he disappeared behind the stage curtain, the audience remained stunned. The hosts attempted to recover the segment, but the energy had already fractured. Cameras kept rolling, capturing the awkward aftermath. Backstage, Rowan paused briefly. A staff member asked if he was all right. He nodded once. "I think I've said enough," he replied simply, then continued walking toward his dressing room. Inside the studio, the conversation resumed, but it felt different now, heavier, uncertain. Joy leaned back in her chair, her expression unreadable, while the other hosts tried to steer things back to lighter topics. But the moment lingered. Within minutes, clips of the exchange would begin circulating online. Viewers would debate, argue, and interpret every second differently. Some would say Rowan stood his ground with dignity. Others would say the exchange exposed a deeper divide between entertainment and commentary. Yet, in the quiet hallway behind the set, none of that mattered. Rowan sat alone for a moment, away from the cameras, away from the noise. The hum of the studio faded behind the walls. He wasn't angry, just distant, as if the conversation had drifted into a space he no longer wished to follow. And somewhere on the other side of the studio lights, the show continued, just without him.